Hi there, I'm Joanna from Ave Maria College, and I'm pleased to present to you my research on enhancing learner confidence and building academic resilience in 15 to 16-year-old girls using VARK learning preferences in a cross-curricular classroom. This research has been completed in conjunction with the Global Action Research Collaborative on Girls' Education 2023 cohort and the International Coalition of Girls' Schools. The use of the VARK tool is with the written consent of the VARK organisation. Before we get into the research, let me tell you a little bit about me and my school. Ave Maria College is a Catholic girls' secondary school founded in 1963 by the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary. The college currently has an enrolment of 830 students and just over 100 staff, of which approximately 70 are teachers. It is located in the inner western suburb of Aberfeldy in Melbourne, Australia, located just 7 kilometres from the CBD. I've worked at Ave Maria College since 2006 in a variety of teaching and leadership roles. I'm currently the Assistant Principal Community and Growth and most recently have been teaching a range of research-based subjects from Years 9 through to 12. We deliver the Victorian curriculum in Years 7 to 10 and the Victorian Certificate of Education in the senior years. The college has a reputation of slightly above average academic performance as measured by our VCE results, national standardised testing tools, and our diverse pathways beyond graduation. This action research project used the VARK Learning Preferences tool as a mechanism to help a group of Year 10 girls discover their learning preferences and, by applying specific strategies related to their preference, attempted to enhance their learning confidence and help build their academic resilience. During the 2020-2021 online learning period that occurred due to the global pandemic, students had to be more independent in how, when and why they participated in learning. For some students, this was a revelation as they embraced autonomy and responsibility, but others struggled as they missed the direction and guidance of their teachers. This forced online learning environment not only highlighted but amplified an issue in girls' learning confidence. Online learning necessitated students to be more independent, and many realised that they did not actually have the tools or self-awareness to engage as positively in the learning experiences as they previously had. In my experience, when students are given the opportunity to explicitly explore different communication modalities and identify what does and does not work for them, they are empowered to be more autonomous in their habits, which contributes to improvements in their learning confidence. Prior to the pandemic, I had been using the VARK tool to support students in building these independent learning skills by exposing them to the VARK Learning Preferences tool and trialling different strategies aligned to the modalities. In light of the changed learning environment that has emerged post-pandemic, I considered that this intervention might be worth exploring more formally by attempting to assess the impact that an awareness of these learning preferences might have on improving learner confidence and academic resilience in these girls. So what exactly are VARK learning preferences? Firstly, I want to acknowledge that the term learning is a little misleading in this phrase because technically we all learn in the same basic way. There are 4 cognitive processes for learning: attention, encoding, storing, and assessing. VARK learning preferences are the communication modalities that we prefer using as they make getting our attention, encoding, and retrieving information easier and more accessible. VARK learning preferences are a specific tool created by New Zealand academic Neil Fleming in 1987. They inform how people like to communicate and are reflected in auditory, read-write, kinaesthetic, and visual modalities. Determining your VARK learning preferences is via a short 16-question survey. An important feature of the survey questions is that for each one, you can select as many or as few options that apply. You can even leave them blank if none of the options or scenarios suit you. In this way, the VARK tool is more accurate than other tools as it does not force a response and provides for multiple possibilities. It's also important to make the distinction between learning preferences and learning styles. Specifically, that these terms are not interchangeable. Fleming himself notes that learning preferences are part of a learning style, but they are not a style in and of themselves. Furthermore, this action research is centred around a specific learning preference tool as a mechanism for students to identify specific communication preferences that suit them, not as a means to diagnose or pigeonhole them into a specific learner type. A key feature of the VARK tool is in recognising that learning preferences are not fixed, Rather, that we have a preference for one or more modalities in certain scenarios, learning environments, and contexts. The tool is reliable, having been accessed by millions of people. In 2020 alone, more than 1.4 million people completed the online questionnaire. Furthermore, self-reporting to the website by approximately 1/3 of all users of the site indicated that 74% had matched their scored preference with their lived experience. In terms of academic resilience and building confidence, it is not the VARK score that is the most useful, but rather the suggested strategies that go with each modality that are its true strength. And indeed, these strategies are adaptable and flexible, which leads to the final reason why VARK is the tool central to this investigation. It focuses on the learner. My action research took place in a Year 10 elective subject known as Chaos Lab. This is a semester-based, cross-curricular subject built primarily around the Victorian Curriculum General Capability of critical and creative thinking. There were 15 students in this class. The first unit of work is called Learning to Learn, where students complete a range of metacognition activities and explore underlying theories and practices around knowledge, truth, and point of view. They also explore their own learning and communication habits and use the VARK tool to develop more efficient practices. After accessing the online VARK tool early in the unit, the students spent several weeks trialling different VARK strategies when completing class activities, in other subjects, and while studying at home. By becoming aware of their preferred modality and recognising that each person processes information differently, the girls would focus on themselves as learners rather than comparing themselves to what others do or don't do when studying. The unit assessment required them to reflect on themselves as a learner in light of what the VARK learning preferences and strategies had revealed. In the assessment portfolio, the girls were required to provide subjective responses to 12 prompt questions based on Bono's thinking hats. This provided multiple perspectives on how knowing their learning preferences had impacted them. Students were free to provide their reflections in any format, provided they responded to all 12 questions. These were open-ended questions. Some required factual, quantitative responses. Others required qualitative responses. To have objectivity, the questions included prompts for benefits, deficits, feelings and emotions, projections and barriers. For example, they were asked, what are the benefits of knowing your learning preferences? Which specific actions do you strongly relate to? How do you feel about knowing your learning preferences? And what's a barrier to embracing the actions that reflect your learning preference? This reflective process was a fundamental step in students building confidence as they began to analyse themselves as a learner. They were able to hone in on their strengths, identify obstacles, and recognise the power and responsibility they had over their own learning, which is fundamental to academic resilience. With the freedom to present their folio in any format, provided it was reflective of their VARK modality preference, the students were empowered to have more control in demonstrating what they had learnt, and it encouraged them to back themselves by making choices for themselves. Here are some of their responses. For this action research to truly determine if knowing your VARK learning modality preferences could improve academic resilience and build long-term learning confidence, simply being shown the tool, trialling some strategies and reflecting was not enough. So 4 months after completing the unit assessment, the students were invited to complete a follow-up questionnaire covering the experience of learning about VARK and specifically what, if any, impact it had on their learning confidence. Students answered 2 sets of Likert scaled questions and 1 open-ended question. They were also invited to attend an interview to discuss this further. 11 of the 15 students completed the questionnaire and 6 students participated in the interviews. When analysing their responses to the follow-up questionnaire, 3 key findings emerged. Finding 1, there were initial benefits and long-term benefits of using VARK learning preferences to enhance learner confidence. When asked about the experience of learning about VARK, all 11 students found the process both positive and interesting. Likewise, all 11 students indicated that they were still using VARK strategies that aligned to their preferred modality or modalities. 9 of the 11 students indicated that learning about VARK improved their confidence as a learner, and 9 students also indicated that learning about VARK improved their self-awareness as a learner, another feature of academic resilience. Finding 2 was that students experienced changed behaviours and feelings caused by their exposure to learning about VARK modalities. This was particularly evident with their responses to the unit assessment, where almost every student discussed that knowing other people processed information differently made them feel better about themselves. Some students demonstrated increased empathy and understanding of how this information about themselves might have benefits for their peers. An interesting benefit that emerged was when students could identify when a change in thinking disposition was required, such as the student who commented, "When you begin struggling to learn or to find answers, it may be a sign that I need to change my thinking disposition." I am conscious of the confirmation bias at play here, given that the students were taught about the potential benefits of knowing their learning preferences. However, all 11 respondents were able to identify at least one benefit specific to their own experience, demonstrating an increase in self-awareness and evidence of an increase in self-confidence. Finding 3 was that there are barriers to successfully applying VARK learning preference modality strategies, but these can be overcome. It was enlightening to read one student's response that noted, "A barrier to me embracing the suggestions or actions that reflect my learning preference is putting in the effort to make a change to my learning and actually use the suggestions." This was another example of an improvement in self-awareness, which leads to academic resilience. This also reflects Fleming's key messages about his tool, that knowledge of the tool alone is not enough to have a positive impact on independence and self-efficacy. They must apply the strategies and reflect on their effectiveness. It is important to note here that the possibilities of not understanding or not having a learning environment that reflects or provides opportunities for students to explore or use different modalities is a limitation. It's also important to point out here that Fleming and VARK do not suggest that this is the teacher's responsibility or priority. In fact, Fleming is quite vocal in stating that knowing about your VARK learning preference is for self-awareness and not for others to respond to. A true measure of self-efficacy or academic resilience is the ability to identify when success is waning and then amend practices accordingly. Here are some of the student responses in the interviews that took place 4 months after the initial assessment was completed.
Yeah, I actually was a bit surprised because I never thought I would be an auditory learner, because I always thought I was more of that person who would just write down notes every time. But now, as I'm in class, I listen to the teacher more instead of I write down notes, but I listen to them more than writing down notes.
Wow, I can use it all round. And it was also interesting because it told me that I was a visual learner as well as reading and writing and audio, and I didn't think that. I didn't know that that was what I was.
Yeah, science, I'm using it. Maths, psychology, all of those subjects, I'm always using those skills that I've learned through Chaos Lab.
I had to look at the visual techniques and stuff, and then I have incorporated that into especially for science, printing out diagrams and stuff a lot more than I used to, and sticking them in my book. Because if I need to flick through my notes really quick to get everything down, when I look at the words, it doesn't really come into my head.
I think my confidence has gotten better and better by learning about my learning preferences, just because I feel more comfortable in the classroom to put my hands up, to go up to the teacher to help, for extra help, and to show me what I actually need to do.
Something and it's not really working, then I can just think that I can do it in a way that will work for me using other techniques and stuff. When revising and stuff, instead of just doing the same thing for each subject, and then for some subjects just not doing as great as I do in other subjects, not knowing why, I can change it for each subject. So for psychology, for example, I like to talk about that one, and I like to explain it to other people how it works, because I find that really interesting, and other people find it really interesting to learn about. But then things for chemistry, lots of practice questions and practice drawings and stuff, is more helpful.
Well, I know I'm an auditory learner, but what I kind of wanted was, I wish I knew about this before, through year 7, 8, 9. I wish I actually knew that I was an auditory learner, so then it would have been better for me to learn. It's not more after, it's before for me.
I wish I kind of knew before year 10 started, so I could start getting ready for SACs and exams in ways that I feel comfortable.
I guess in high school sometime, I think everyone should learn it. I've actually been making other people do it. I made my cousin, because she's in year 12 and she's doing holiday homework, and it's the last week, and she's done nothing, and she's I just don't like doing the work, I don't like doing whatever they tell me to, and so I'm do this test, so I'm going to do the test.
Conclusion. In exploring whether an awareness of VARK learning preferences can improve learning confidence and build academic resilience, It is important to state that any measure of confidence is not easily quantified, and it is subject to learning experiences and environments which are dynamic and constantly changing. That said, all participants in this study expressed positive responses to learning about VARK preferences and modalities, and could recognise that this knowledge improved their understanding of themselves as a learner, as well as how others learn, or more specifically, how others take in and express information. Long-term benefits and measures of academic resilience is more challenging and would require further feedback, more akin to a longitudinal study. However, in relative terms, the fact that all participants were continuing to use VARK strategies aligned to their learning preference modalities more than 4 months after initially being exposed to them would suggest that this is a favourable tool that has potential to have long-lasting benefits for a student's learning success.